Hello everyone, welcome to the next series in How to Teach. This one's been inspired by a message I received about how do you get a child to learn that doesn't want to be taught, or a child that doesn't want to sit down and do writing or maths with you at a table. Now, all the way through the How to Teach sessions, we've been looking at how you use play to learn certain concepts. So my name's Nicola Ross and I own the McGrath Education Centre at Sheffield Central. We offer children additional support in their maths and English. We use a lot of games, a lot of play within our lessons to help engage children. Play is particularly important because the scientists have recently discovered that it takes around 400 repetitions to create a new synapse, new brain pathway in the brain, unless it's done through play. And if it's done through play, then it takes between 10 and 20 repetitions. So children are hardwired, in fact, everyone is hardwired to learn through play. And for those reasons, that's why we try and have a lot of games, a lot of play in the specific areas we teach. Now, this one is going to be slightly different from the other How to Teach sessions because previously we've taken specific subject areas or specific skills and looked at how you would teach that skill and use play within there as well. The way I chose the skills to cover was looking at what the children have that come into the centre, which are the key areas that we seem to be teaching day in, day out, the gaps that appear all the time. So that's how we've come up with those ideas. Now, today's is more about teaching your child general thinking skills, building their thinking skills. So as you join the meeting, if you want to just give me a thumbs up or hi and let me know the age of your child, and then I can talk a little longer about your particular age child and what would be suitable for them. Now, when we're thinking about teaching a child, it's better to say I'm thinking about facilitating learning than I'm thinking about teaching, because children learn all the time and they're not taught. So you don't have to be taught in order to learn. You're picking things up all the time in lots of different ways. You can self-teach, you can observe. You don't need to be physically taught in order to learn. Okay, so when we're developing our children's skills, we want to develop their thinking skills, their reasoning skills, their critical skills, their analysis skills, in order to create a child who is a really good thinker, a really good learner. So whatever the world throws at them, they can adapt to it and they can learn whatever it is they need to develop. So there are kind of three areas of cognitive thinking skills that we ideally want to look at. One is information gathering. So this is how you input information into the body in the first place. So through your senses, what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and through your memories. Understanding comes under organizing ideas, forming concepts, and making links. We talked quite a lot about link making in the last session, looking at the brain pathways and how they start to link together. And the last one is productive thinking. So this is using and understanding the information that you have. It's creating, deciding, analysing and evaluating with all that information that you've acquired. Okay, now a great way of doing this is through family games. And I thought this would be quite a good time with it coming in the summer holidays. There's going to be more time for you to play together with your children. So what I'm going to do is run through different types of play and give you some examples of different games, and then hopefully that'll give you some tools to take away and use over the summer and onwards, hopefully. If, as I'm talking, if you think, oh yeah, there's this game that I play and it's really good, just pop it in the comments, because I'm only going to give you a little kind of snapshot. There's billions of games out there. But if there's something that you think, yeah, this is great for this bit, then just pop it in the comments and then other people can share those as well. All right. Okay, so we'll start off looking at early years, so little children, so preschool age children up to kind of the age of 4. Developing their thinking skills, they mainly play through practical play, lots of role play, lots of playing with toys, lots of songs, lots of rhyme. The songs and the rhyme build their number skills, but they build lots of other areas of their collaboration as well. Jigsaws are amazing from very early on, even just 2-piece jigsaws, because they use the same brain pathways as the mathematical, the critical, and the analytical thinking. So jigsaws all the way through are a brilliant tool for developing thinking skills. One of the other ones that I found works really well is the marble run. I have an example of a marble run. Hopefully show it to you. So this, I'm losing a bit of my marble one. Can you see that? That's a marble one. So you get these in lots of different bits, and children have to build them. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. The children have to build them, and as they're building them, they need to work out how is the marble going to flow down through the track. So I'll just bring this down a little bit. It might be easier than holding it up. Here we go. Okay, so I put the marble in one end, goes through to the other, and comes down. So mine's a very simple one, very plain. But you can build these into great towers, and the amount of critical thinking needed and creative thinking needed to work out how that marble's going to flow without just dropping straight through a hole is a really great tool. And they can spend hours, and it's something they can do independently or they can do it together. So marble runs are brilliant, especially for younger children. One thing we've talked about quite a lot over the series is baking. No, it's not strictly play, but it can be. Baking ticks so many boxes in terms of developing thinking skills and practical skills and physical skills. You've got measuring, you've got reading, you've got proportion, you've got science. So everything comes into baking. So the summer's a really good time to do some baking together. There's lovely child-friendly cookbooks that you can use, or you could hand down a recipe, and there's a lot to be said for baking and cooking with children. You don't have to make it into a lesson. You don't say, this is how we read the scales, and this is this number, and this is this number. You can ask them, do you know how to read the scales? And if they do, they can do it. And if not, say, okay, so I'm going to put it in, I'm going to wait for the needle to get to here, because that's fine. 10, brilliant, let's put that in. So the teachery bit doesn't really need to come in. The children are going to pick it up anyway. And often when they're in the school holidays, doing the teachery bit, they sometimes block off because it blocks the play part of the brain that they're using. So you want to try and steer clear of the teaching bit when you're working with your child or playing with your child at home. Okay, so that's the little ones. Lots of different skills: games, singing, running, all the things that you need to build their physical skills, the climbing, the swing, and then their cognitive skills as well. They do need to have quite good physical skills before we start to give them pens and paper. So they need to have done Play-Doh, they need to have done threading beads, they need to have done all these fine motor things, but they also need to have been climbing up trees and digging in mud and all the other areas that children enjoy. Okay, so that brings us on to the next one. I'm going to break the next few things down into the sections. So depending on you and your child, will depend on what kind of play you're going to engage in. One is physical. So physical play is literally loads of movement. The movement is a great way for the brain to learn. The brain wants the body to move. So for things like hide and seek, when you're hiding something, so when we were doing the learning numbers, we'd hide numbers all over the garden, and they'd go and find them and come and put them on the massive number line that we had in the garden. And they loved that game. That game was played over and over and over again. They had no concept that we were learning numbers. They just thought they were trying to find the numbers before anyone else. Treasure hunts are great, and you can do these on a coordinates map. So you put your numbers down one side, your letters along the bottom, have a little map of your house or of your garden or the park, and you can hide things in different places, or hide your painted rocks, whatever it might be, and they have to then go follow the coordinates to find the exciting things. Works really well at Easter when you're doing Easter egg hunts. Ball games is the other one. So in kicking balls back and forwards, or throwing balls, or bean bags, or hitting them with the bats, whichever one it might be. And you can be counting how many strikes you can get. You can count up in tens, you can count up in twos, you can count up in ones. And all those things are good fun, and you're kind of practicing at the same time. And there's a bit of a rhythm comes to it. So you get this sing-songy effect as well. Okay, so lots of physical options. I mean, there's hundreds of physical things you can do. It's just a little handful. Card games. Okay, so card games can come in really early. There's millions of them. So you can have things like matching games. These are, my daughter brought me these to me probably this morning. She says, can we play matching games? So the matching games, when you put your cards face down, and then you pick one up, and you try and pick another one up, and you've got to try and make a pair. You get the pair, you keep the pair. If the two that you pick up aren't a pair, you put them back down. Now these are great in developing memory, making links. So arrange the cards so they go in lines, because it's much easier to remember in relation to another card than it is if they're just scattered around the table. If you want to make it more difficult, scatter them around the table. Okay, so if they start off with the lines, pick one up and then pick another one up. If the pair's right, keep the pairs. If not, put them back down. This game is also really good for children who struggle to focus, because they have to be aware of what you're doing on your go as well as what they're doing on their go in order to make the pairs together and see which cards you had. So pairs games are really great. These are the ones that we used to have as children, so they've lasted well. Alice in Wonderland pairs. The other card games are playing cards. There's lots and lots of games online, kids playing card games online. These are brilliant for fast number skills, fast analytical and critical thinking skills. Lots of tactical awareness in here as well. They're quite nice to do before bed because they wind down, they're quite static, but you're still triggering those pathways, those synapses to fire. And you can also get them progressively more difficult. So playing card games. And then one more card game, I'm sure many of you will have got lots of different kinds of these. Top trumps. There's a theme going on with our family. You tell who I have at home. Top trumps are great because they involve maths, they involve reading, they involve critical thinking skills and analytical thinking skills. And you can get them in whatever your child is interested in. There is a top trumps for everything, every possible topic that you can come up with. So they're great as well. All right then. So that's the card games. The other ones are board games. So the first one I often start with is Snakes and Ladders, because you're learning how to count on one. And when we do all the number line work, it's that idea jump and count. So 4 add 3. Start on the 4 and then you jump 3. Jump 1, 2, 3. Often what children do is they'll put their finger on the 4 and say 1, 2, and then you've only added 2 rather than 3. It'll become clear when you look at a board. But the counting on skills involved in Snakes and Ladders is great. And you can also say, oh, I've landed on 23. And then the children start to say, oh, I've landed on 43. So if they haven't yet learnt their numbers, it's a really good way of teaching their numbers as well, especially the bigger numbers, because you're obviously going all the way up to 100. A nice variation on Snakes and Ladders, and I have used this with 4-year-olds as well, is this one, Takes and Adders. I thought play on words for you. Rather than having a die, if you have cards, I'll give you a little demo of this one. Oh, I have to go down to the floor. Okay, so you'd pick a number card. You'd pick a plus or minus card. In this case, it's a plus. And then you pick another number card. Oh, I don't want that one. I want the other one. This one. Okay. And then you work out the equation, so 3 plus 4 is 7, and you've moved 7 places. And this game's really interesting because you can start to make it quite tricky. If I had 3 minus 4, 3 minus 4, then you start to move into negative numbers. So I often draw a number line out with a 0 in the middle, plus numbers on one side, and negative numbers on the other. And so the children need to use a number line to work out how many places back they've got to go. So if they pick 2 minus 8, they've got to work out that they'll have to go back 6 places. So you can make it quite complex and introduce those negative numbers really early on. If the number line's there, then a lot of children will just accept you to do negative numbers. So it's a lovely game to play, that one. I enjoy that. And you get to add snakes. So you can put a snake on your person you're playing with, and they have to go down it. Or you can add ladders to yourself, and you have to go up it. So there's some quite nice little tactics in there too. The other board game that is brilliant, absolutely brilliant, is Monopoly. Monopoly says a lot about the people who are playing it. So if you look at the tactics and the skills that they use when they're playing Monopoly, and the thinking skills they use when they're playing Monopoly, often that's the same skills they use as an adult. So that's what they'll start to go into. Monopoly is great for the money, for doubling, for multiplying by 4s, multiplying by 10s. Again, we have Disney Monopoly. So instead of having a boot, we have Peter Pan. Instead of having the stations, we have a Cinderella's carriage, for example. So you can get Monopoly that fits the theme for your child as well as the original ones as well. So they're great. Now the other game that I haven't tried yet, but a lot of friends have told me about, is Zombie Apocalypse. And that's one where you've got to use a lot of mental calculations. It's not as freaky as it sounds, and children really love it because it's a little bit weird, which is good if you're trying to engage your child. Any other board games that you've got that I think are really good, a Game of Life, any of those, pop them in the comments, and we can all share the different games that we've got going on. So another one that's quite handy is pen and paper games. So pen and paper games you can use particularly when you're sitting in cafes or restaurants or on long car journeys, when you really need to keep the children still, but you also want to keep them engaged without them running around the restaurant, and you want to maybe not put a movie on for them. So the pen and paper games, there's lots, but a little example is Hangman, and you can choose whether or not you put the little spider in the corner of the hanging gallows. You can do noughts and crosses, and lots of tactics involved in noughts and crosses. You could do story, so you write a line, one person writes a line of the story. Once upon a time, there was a mouse. And then they fold it over and they pass it to the next person. And the next person writes a line of the story. A boy came into the city. And then they fold it over and pass it on. So the person next to you doesn't know what you've just written. You're just writing the next development of the story. What happens next? What happens next? What happens next? And then when you open it all out at the end, you've got a very weird and wonderful story. But often they're really good. They flow really nicely. The other way you can do that is pictorially. So you may have done this as children as well, where you draw, first person draws a head and they fold it over. The next person draws the neck and the shoulders and you fold it over. Next person does the arms and the waist, fold it over. So when you open it up, you have the full person, but everyone's done them slightly differently to make it all fit together. With that one, it's worth just putting little lines before you fold over so the person, after, you can see where the body actually is on the page. Otherwise you end up with arms at one side and feet at another, and it all gets a bit confused. The other pen and paper game that I quite like, especially for slightly older kids, kind of 7 upwards, is Battleships. If you've never done this, it's easy on a squared piece of paper. So you draw your 2 axes. So you have your numbers down one side, letters along the bottom. And on your squared paper, you put your battleships. So I might put a ship at A3, and then I'll put a ship at D7, and then I'll put a ship at F4, for example. And your partner does the same. They put their ships where they want, and you don't look at each other's ships. And then you tell them what you're firing at. So you say, I'm going to fire at A4. And they tell you whether it's a hit or a miss. If it's a hit, then they had a battleship on A4 and you've just sunk it. So on yours, you put a little tick. If it's a miss, then you put a cross, because you know that they have no battleship at that particular point. If that makes sense. And the skills involved in that, your coordinate skills, and then you're developing your analytical thinking to work out, okay, so there wasn't a ship there, but there must be something there because I've eliminated these areas. So it can get quite animated and quite exciting. And again, you can do it in a car or on a longer journey. If you're going away for the holidays and be in the car for a while, that's good for one to do. And you don't have to be able to see each other's either. Okay. Now there are some practical games as well. This is one that we use quite a lot in the centre. The Connect 4. What the children have to do, if you've not seen it before, is you start off with an empty grid. One of you is red, one of you is yellow, and children have to drop the counters in, and you're trying to get 4 in a row. So your row can either be horizontal, it can be vertical, or it can be diagonal. And whoever gets 4 in a row first wins. The other person's job is to block that line. So it's a really simple game, but the amount of strategy needed to win is actually quite intense. It goes a bit full on. We recently tried to take this game camping with us. It's not really one that you can take camping. There was a lot of falling over and coins falling out and looking under beds for coins and that kind of thing. I'm sure there must be a travel version that would be brilliant, but this one wasn't. But it's great in the house, and it can be quite a quick game as well. Good game's a quick game. Okay. So the last one I just want to talk you through, because we've gone on for a little bit of time, is this over here. Now this is Osmo. I don't know if you've seen this before. Just move some of these things out of the way. Osmo is a game that you use on the iPad, and we find it really helpful in the centre for children who need to develop their mental maths. And it's great because they don't realise what they're doing. And often you have children who can't do mental maths but can do Osmo, because it's the play side that's coming through. So there's a little mirror up here, and for those of you who can't see, there's a sea, an ocean here, and I have to put tiles in front, so I have these tiles to add up to the bubbles. Then the bubbles get popped. I'll just turn the sound up a little bit. And you get fish and coral falling. Oh, I've just had a bomb. There's a bit of coral falling in there. Okay, so now I've made my 10. Now I can make 8 or 9. So I'm going to take my 10 out. I want to make 9. No, I don't want to make 8. So I can make 8. Pop my 8 one. Hey, and I've won! Okay. It's a favourite of mine. But Osmo have lots of different games that you can use. There's a pizza shop one that talks about profit and loss as well as all the money side of things, and it's a really great tool to have. Okay, so that's just a whistle-stop tour of lots of games that you can play over the summer and developing your child's thinking skills. And they're going to be learning so much through doing these games. You don't need to be worrying about doing hours and hours of spellings or hours and hours of written maths, because the play is actually, it's learning smarter rather than doing more. You want good, smart learning in short periods of time rather than plying them with hours and hours of extra work because you're worried they're going to slip behind. Having said that, if you do want to give your children a little bit of extra time and you don't want to be doing it at home, you don't want it to get in the way of the family fun time, we have got the summer school running. It's going to run throughout the holidays, and children just come in for an hour a week. They can do any skills that they need to practice, or anything they're struggling on. We can work on those, and we write an individual program. So if that's something you might be interested in, you can contact us by phone on 01142 700 303, or you can visit the webpage, which is kitmcgrath.co.uk/Sheffield Central. Or you can contact me through Facebook, of course. Just send me a message with a contact number, and I'll get back to you as soon as we can. Okay, have a very lovely summer. I will see you in the next school year. Thank you very much for watching. Bye now.